What if I worked in a cafe? How long would it take me, working as a barista, to earn enough money to pay for the cappuccinos, one that we would serve in that cafe? Well, what if we had that data, that metric, from thousands of baristas around the world? What if, as a bonus, we had matching data from a little over 10 years ago? What could it tell us about the state of the coffee economy, the state of our cities, the state of all things? We call it the Cappuccino Index. And here is what we learned. Two quick caveats. First one, the old data set back from a decade ago is a fair bit smaller. It's back from when I had a blog. People used to have blogs. It was good back then, back before Google Reader shut down and doomed the world to algorithmically gated content forever. I digress. The second, more important caveat is around wages. We asked people for their gross wage, not their net wage, even though net wages would be more accurate for the calculation. But a lot of people just don't know their net wage, and it may vary depending on how many hours they work in a week. In the US, not only did we just ask for wage, we asked them to exclude tips. Tips are kind of messed up, highly variable. It tells you more about the mood of your clientele than anything else as far as I'm concerned. So with the US specifically, bear in mind we just asked for wages, no tips. And now in the Cappuccino Index, it's time for the headline numbers. We're going to cover the top 3 countries, the bottom 3 countries, a few in between. How many minutes do you have to work to earn yourself a cappuccino? That's the question we're asking. And we'll start with the country where you work the least amount of time. We're going to go to Australia. 10 minutes and 5 seconds only. That is very nearly 6 cappuccinos an hour. Colour me impressed, Australia. Now in second place, a little bit of a surprise. We go to Europe, to Italy. Just under 12 minutes, 11:51. Impressed. Less of a surprise. Third place, back to Antipodean. Why, it's New Zealand. 12 minutes and 43 seconds. The sensible question would be, are these just places that pay the most to be a barista? The answer is no, but we'll talk about it. Don't you worry. Let's look at the other extreme, places you have to work the longest. And I suppose this puts it at the bottom of the list. We only had 11 responses, but on average, in India, you had to work for 172 minutes and 24 seconds. That's about the duration of Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey. And that is a very long time. Now in second place, there's a bit of a drop. We come across to the Philippines. Maybe an hour less, actually, at 110 minutes, 43 seconds, a pretty normal movie runtime, I would say, but still a very, very, very long time. And third place, across the globe, takes us to Mexico. 74 minutes and 35 seconds, another big, big drop. Maybe that's a function of the data, not having enough samples. We can't really say for sure, but pretty extreme as it goes. Now, that's the top 3, that's the bottom 3. You may also wonder about other countries that we haven't yet discussed. So we pulled a handful out. We thought we'd talk about them just briefly. In no particular order, other than the UK's at the top, 17 minutes and 30 seconds for my nearest and dearest United Kingdom. Quite a lot slower than Australia, which is interesting. Quicker than the United Kingdom is Ireland, just under 16 minutes. That's quite a bit faster. Now the United States, 17 minutes and 55 seconds. That is going to be messed with slightly by the fact that we didn't ask people to include tips in their earnings. And so that number, in reality, it may be lower. We can't say for sure. Germany, 14 minutes and 59 seconds. Pretty quick, pretty interesting. Now, Denmark will come up a lot today in this whole video, and so we have them at 19 minutes and 24 seconds. Quite a long time, which will be surprising, I promise. Now, Canada, interesting to compare to the United States, they're neighbours, but tipping cultures may be a little bit different there. Does that explain why wages may be higher and timing is shorter? Oh, it's a good question. And then down at the bottom, we thought Singapore was interesting to include. 25 minutes and 13 seconds. Now, there are obviously many countries that we haven't put on the screen here today. If you're curious about your country or another country, well, there's a link in the description. You can explore the data and find out the answer to the question that you may have. And these indices are interesting to compare to one another, the UK to Ireland. That's an interesting comparison, but a more interesting comparison is to compare this data to the data that we collected 11 years ago. How does it compare? A couple of things about that data though. Firstly, there were way fewer responders to the survey, unsurprisingly, really. Still enough for us to have some good comparison points around the world, which is great. Second one, we did lose the raw data, but we published a bunch of charts and we labeled all the charts, which was very smart of us in hindsight, so we can in fact pull the data from the charts and use it for our comparison. To represent the 2015 data, I'd like to introduce my younger self. So I will start with a question. Do you think the index where you live went up or down? Oh, good question. Thanks. Put another way, do you think that a barista's wages has gone up, which would cause the index to go down, or do you think a cappuccino's price has gone up faster, which would cause the index to go up? Now, everyone is fully aware that we have a cost of living crisis in many, many parts of the world. You'll be aware that the price of your daily coffee has unquestionably gone up quite sharply. However, the results from this survey were not what we expected. In a lot of countries, we've seen a drop in the index. It certainly isn't universal though. Now, this is interesting. You can see in the UK, the index has gone down, perhaps unexpected, but I have a theory, a little pet theory behind this whole thing, that of competition. I think a competitive market drives the index down. You look at places like London, it's not saturated here in terms of coffee shops, but it does feel pretty close. So you're arguing that competition in a market drives up wages as cafes compete for skilled staff, but stops pricing going up for coffee because people are trying to compete for customers too. Pretty much. Now, obviously we can't ignore the fact that the change is not universal. You know, there are places, unexpected places, where the index has gone up. I can't look at Norway or Denmark or Spain or Japan and give you a coherent explanation about why the index has increased, even as I would say competition has increased in those markets. However, I do firmly believe that competition is a key idea behind this whole thing. As always, your suggestions or thoughts are very welcome down in the comments below. Thanks, James. So you love coffee, maybe the index can help you out in a different sort of a way. If you like to travel, could it tell you where the cheapest or most expensive cappuccinos in the world are to be found? Well, maybe it can. Here's the top 3 of each. We're going to be working in reverse order today, and yes, we're also going to work in my currency. I make no apologies. Now, Norway, in 3rd place, are probably pretty mad about who's in 2nd, which is Denmark at £5.52. Look at this, an incredibly expensive cappuccino, and yet they are the happiest country in the world. All of that hygge and everything else. Disgusting. And the top spot goes to Switzerland, averaging £5.63, which is a lot for a cappuccino, though probably not surprising if you've been to Switzerland recently. To make our prestigious list, we needed 10 entries minimum from that country. The highest average technically was Saudi Arabia at 633, but we only had 1 entrant, so that shouldn't count. The single most expensive cappuccino was from Copenhagen at £10.43. But what about the cheapest? Our 3rd spot today on the cheapest list goes to India at just £2.04 on average for a cappuccino. 2nd place on our list is the Philippines at £1.79 on average for a cappuccino, which is not very much. Now you might think there's a theme, you can kind of guess where we're going. Can you guess the cheapest country? I don't know if you can. The top spot for the cheapest average cappuccino goes to Italy. Now, when I say that, you're probably not surprised, but I bet you didn't think of it beforehand. Now, a couple of important things. Firstly, remember Italy being cheap. That's important. It'll come up later. Secondly, there's obviously a little bit of selection bias based on the kind of people who are responding to me or who know what we do on this YouTube channel. It's time now to talk about some serious business. It's time to discuss hourly earnings. Who's earning the most? Who's earning the least worldwide? Does that drive that country's cappuccino index? It's a very good question. What we'll do is we'll look at each as a kind of top 3, as a 3, 2, 1 reveal, starting, I think, with the highest earners overall. And so, in 3rd place, Australia, with £16.36 per hour when converted to a currency that's, frankly convenient to me. In 2nd place, just above it, is Denmark, 17.07, so just a little bit more. Now, you've seen the price of a Danish cappuccino. It's not cheap, but we didn't see Australia's cappuccino anywhere near the top 3 most expensive. Interesting stuff. Now, most relevant here, I think most interesting, Switzerland, up at the top. Look at this, £23.48 per hour. That's a substantial jump over everybody else. Now, Switzerland, clearly an expensive place to exist. And you'll remember a Swiss cappuccino, also incredibly expensive, but we don't really see a perfect overlap here between the highest earners and their cappuccino index sort of top three. What about the other end of things though? If we look at sort of the lowest earning countries according to the survey, why in third place, it's Mexico at £2.14 per hour according to the respondents to our survey. And the next one I think will give the game away. Second place, the Philippines, with I think 97 pence per hour being the earnings. And this is starting to line up pretty neatly with the cappuccino index kind of bottom end of the table. And so we would expect in third place what we find, India. India at just 71 pence per hour on average. That's an enormous difference. That's essentially, if you're in Switzerland, you're earning, let's say on average, 33 times more than a barista in India. And yet your cappuccino is only something like 2.8 times more expensive. This is going to drive a pretty big difference in your cappuccino index. And while this does explain the bottom end of the table, I think pretty neatly, this is clearly the driving factor behind things, it doesn't explain the index overall. Something else must be at play, other factors. We should explore some other factors. And to do so, I'm going to hand you over to our correspondent in the field. Well, what if we take this idea of competition driving down the cappuccino index and we look at the UK in a bit more detail? Now, each cafe could be tagged by the barista who work there as either being urban, suburban or rural, and so we would expect the lowest index in urban areas. And that's what we find. And you'd think as competition decreased, as you went sort of out, you'd see the index come up. But that isn't what we see, because next is rural and then suburban. But probably quite importantly, the differences here are really pretty small. But what about cities? Well, in the UK we've got tons of data. Let's start with London. Now, I would say London probably has the highest density of specialty coffee shops in particular. So it's probably the most competitive coffee scene in the UK. What about the other end of the scale? Well, while London may have the lowest index to go with that, Edinburgh has the highest. Is Edinburgh the least competitive coffee city in the UK? That's hard to prove or disprove. I guess you'd need information about sort of number of outlets and distribution and population densities and daytime population densities. Hard to prove or disprove, but if you can do either, leave a comment down below, I'd appreciate that. This idea of competition tying to the index does appeal to me, and it makes me think about the two countries that are sort of at the top of the list for having the lowest index, and that's Australia and Italy. Now, both of those highly developed, very competitive, very dense coffee cultures, lots and lots and lots of coffee shops. And at the same time, I think they'd both argue a real ceiling on price. Now, Italy historically did have a ceiling on price, I think. I think there was legislation that capped the price of an espresso at the bar at €1. And if you talk to Australian coffee shop owners, they definitely feel a real cultural ceiling on what people are willing to pay for coffee. No one's really willing to push up and to find out that they're the one who crossed that threshold first.
And so what then does the cappuccino tell us about the world that we wouldn't already know? Does it add something to our understanding of the world, of coffee in particular? That's a good question. Now, in this, we did think to compare it to other popular indexes. We could look at GDP and see, does it correlate? Yeah, pretty well. There's a very popular cost of living index. Does it correlate to that? Yeah, pretty well, but it doesn't really replace either of them. What does it add? Well, I think it says something about competitiveness or saturation within a coffee scene. If you look at the ones that are kind of the top three, those are most definitely much more competitive coffee scenes, much more saturated, and I think that plays out in the cappuccino index. However, you could argue that maybe it doesn't say that much about it if you look at, say, Spain or Denmark or China. All of those have become much more competitive. They're all developing coffee scenes, yet their index has actually gone up, not down. That said, it's hard to really know where exactly within each geography we're getting the data from. What's the sort of quality of each cafe? What's their aspiration? Are they specialty? Are they more commercial? We just don't know. Coffee, as a part of our economy, as an industry, is full of these awkward questions that I do think are worth asking. I don't like asking them, but I think about things like, how many kilos of coffee does a coffee producer have to grow in order to make enough money to drink just 15 grams of their own coffee served as a filter in a London cafe? That's not a question that's going to make you feel good, but it is worth asking. How many hours each day does a barista have to work typically just to pay their rent? These are uncomfortable, awkward questions. They don't make you feel good, but I think they're worth asking, and I think the Cappuccino Index is in the spirit of those things. Back to the Cappuccino Index, I do think that a little bit more frequency in asking the question would improve the value of the answer. We've waited 11 years and we can see change, but if we ask this each year, then I think we'd reveal much more sort of interesting insights in the way that the world is changing, and that may be where it is most useful. And if you think that's something you'd like to see, then leave me a comment down below. Should we try and do this every year, or at least every couple of years? Are there other questions that we didn't answer that could be answered by the data in the Cappuccino Index? Linked in the description is the data set if you want to go and explore and ask and answer some of your own questions too. If you find something interesting, do please leave us a comment down below. But for now, I'll say thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a great day.